One morning I got a text. No call, no voice message, just a photo, a thermometer, reading 101 degrees, and underneath it, 4 words. Can't make it today. The person who sent that was supposed to show up for a job interview in 2 hours. The night before, they texted me, I'm so ready. See you tomorrow. And yet, when I saw that thermometer photo, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel surprised. I just thought to myself, oh, again. Because here's the thing. It wasn't the first time, and it wasn't the last. Over the past 10 years, I've worked in recruitment, placing workers into care facilities, sitting in on hundreds of interviews, watching people at their most honest and their most carefully dishonest. And somewhere along the way, I started noticing something. When people want to protect themselves, they reach for the same excuses. The sick day photo, the sudden my partner has concerns, the interview answer of I'm totally flexible, followed 3 days later by actually that schedule doesn't work for me. Same patterns, different people, every time. But here's what I want you to take away from today's video. This isn't a video about calling people out. It's not about who's lying and who isn't. By the time this video ends, you're going to understand why people do this. And there's a good chance you're going to think, I've done that too. That moment of recognition, that's what we're here for. Here's something counterintuitive. The more you understand why people behave the way they do, the less it bothers you. Not because you become a pushover, but because when you can see the pattern, you stop taking the behavior personally, you stop reacting, you start observing. And that shift from reacting to observing is one of the most quietly powerful things you can do for your mental health. We're going to look at 3 patterns today. Each one is rooted in real psychology. Each one shows up not just in job interviews, but in relationships, friendships, and honestly, in your own behavior too. Let's get into it. Let me ask you something. When you're genuinely sick, fever, body aches, can't get out of bed, what do? You probably silence your alarm, pull the blanket back up, maybe send a quick message when you can barely see straight. What you probably don't do is prop up a thermometer, make sure the lighting is decent, take a clear photo, and send it with a politely worded explanation. But I've received that more than once, and not just in recruitment. Think about your own life for a second. Have you ever had a friend cancel plans, and along with the cancellation, they sent you a photo of their medicine cabinet or a screenshot of their doctor's appointment? Or maybe a partner who said they were stuck at work and sent you a picture of their office desk to prove it? You didn't ask for proof, but there it was. And doesn't it feel slightly off? That feeling of something's off has a name in psychology. And to understand it, we need to talk about a concept called cognitive dissonance. In 1957, social psychologist Leon Festinger proposed one of the most influential ideas in modern psychology. When our actions contradict our self-image, we experience intense psychological discomfort. Think about it this way. Most people don't see themselves as liars. They see themselves as decent, honest, considerate people. So when they do something that conflicts with that image, like canceling on someone for a reason that isn't entirely true, there's friction, internal friction, a quiet voice that says, that wasn't totally honest, and that friction is unbearable. So what does the brain do? It looks for a way to make the friction stop. And one of the fastest ways to do that is to create evidence. Sending that thermometer photo isn't really about convincing you. It's about convincing themselves. See, I have proof. I really am sick. I'm not a bad person. The photo is less about communication and more about self-forgiveness. Festinger actually tested this in a now famous experiment. He had participants complete an incredibly boring task, turning wooden pegs on a board over and over for an hour. Afterward, he asked them to tell the next participant that the task had been enjoyable. To lie, in other words. Half the participants were paid $1 to do this. The other half were paid $20. Then Festinger asked everyone, so, how much did you actually enjoy the task? Here's what he found. The people paid $20. They said the task was boring, which makes sense. They had a clear reason to lie. The money explained it. But the people paid just $1. They actually rated the task as more enjoyable. Not because it was, but because their brain couldn't tolerate the gap between I lied and I'm a good person without a reason big enough to justify it. So the brain quietly rewrote the story. Maybe it wasn't so bad. That's cognitive dissonance in action. The brain doesn't just rationalize our actions, it edits our memory of them. And this doesn't just happen in job situations. Think about a time someone in your life went out of their way to prove something to you without you asking. A partner who texted you unprompted photos of where they were. A friend who sent screenshots to back up their story. A colleague who over-explained why they missed a deadline in a long, detailed email that somehow felt more like a defense brief. Here's a useful test. When you're genuinely at peace with what you've done, do you offer evidence? If you slept in and canceled morning plans, do you send a photo of your pillow? Of course not. Because when there's nothing to hide, there's no discomfort to soothe. Honest people don't volunteer proof. They offer alternatives. I can't make it today. How does Thursday look? The presence of unprompted evidence isn't a sign of honesty. It's a sign that someone is working hard to convince themselves. Now here's where it gets interesting and a little more compassionate. If you've ever done this yourself, sent the screenshot, offered the unsolicited proof, I don't want you to feel bad about it, because the research actually suggests that the people most likely to do this are the ones with the strongest empathy. When you care about how someone feels, the idea of letting them down is genuinely painful. So the brain scrambles to soften the blow, to create evidence that says, it's not that I didn't want to show up for you. Look, I really couldn't. It's an act of guilt management. And guilt, in its own way, is a sign of caring. The thermometer photo isn't cold. It's actually kind of tender. What it says underneath everything is, I don't want you to feel like you don't matter to me. Understanding that changes how it lands. Here's the second pattern I started noticing. This one I've seen more times than I can count. Picture this. Everything is lined up. A job offer has been made. A start date agreed on. Everyone is excited. And then something interesting happens. I talked to my boyfriend about it, and he has some concerns. Or you've probably seen this version. A friend agrees to come to your event. Confirms twice. And then 2 days before, my family isn't really comfortable with it. Or in dating. I want to keep seeing you, but my friends think we're moving too fast. The moment I hear this, something settles in me. Not frustration, just recognition. Because in my experience, when a third party gets introduced at the last second, it almost never changes the outcome. The decision was already made. The third party is just the messenger. Psychology has a name for this: external attribution or blame shifting. It's the act of relocating the source of a decision from yourself to someone else. And it comes from one of the most human instincts there is. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Think about what's actually happening in that moment. The person has already decided to back out. But the thought of delivering that message directly, of watching your face fall, of being the one who caused disappointment, is genuinely difficult for them. So a third party appears. It's not me. It's the boyfriend. It's the parents. It's my friends. Psychologists call this interpersonal conflict avoidance. And research shows that the fear of disappointing someone who has clearly invested in us can feel more threatening than the actual consequences of backing out. The introduction of an invisible third party is a way of stepping out of the conflict while still being physically in the room. And here's the thing. Does this sound familiar? Have you ever said, my family thinks I should, when what you actually meant was, I want to, but I don't know how to say it directly? Most of us have. Here's the practical part. When someone brings in an invisible third party, you only need to do one thing. Ask one quiet question, setting that aside for a moment. What do you think? Not confrontationally, not as a trap, just with genuine curiosity. If there's a real answer there, it will come. If the third party was the whole story, you'll feel that too. And then you'll know. You don't need to chase it. You don't need to argue with a phantom. The answer has already arrived. Now, the third pattern. This one is different from the first two. The thermometer photo and the invisible third party. Those are ways people exit situations. This third pattern happens when people are entering one. And what makes it so interesting is this: the person isn't lying. Not exactly. Picture a job interview. The candidate is asked, are you flexible with your schedule? And they say completely sincerely, eyes bright, voice steady, absolutely. Whatever you need. I've heard it hundreds of times. And I've watched the same person, 2 weeks into the role, say, actually, that schedule is going to be a problem for me. Is that person dishonest? I used to think so. I don't anymore. Psychology explains this with two ideas working together. The first is called social desirability bias. Humans have a deep instinctive drive to present themselves favorably in social situations, especially high-stakes ones. A job interview, a first date, a performance review. In these moments, the brain shifts into, Be what they need you to be mode, not out of malice, out of survival instinct. The second idea comes from behavioral economics, a concept called hyperbolic discounting, made famous by Nobel Prize winner Richard Thaler. The idea is simple. We dramatically overvalue the present compared to the future. When the reward, the job, the approval, the yes is right in front of us, the future cost feels invisible. Of course you'll be fine with early mornings. Of course you'll be patient. Of course you're flexible. In that moment, it's true. The future version of you, the tired one, the one who has to actually live with that decision, doesn't have a seat at the table. Here's the simplest way to understand this. Think about the last time you set an alarm for 6 a.m. because you were going to start working out. Night you, fully committed. This is it. New me starts tomorrow. Morning you, hit snooze without even opening your eyes. Night you wasn't lying. Night you genuinely meant it. But night you and morning you are operating with completely different information. That's not weakness. That's just how the human brain works. And the person in the interview who said they were totally flexible, they were night you. So if words in high-pressure moments can't be trusted, what can you actually rely on? The answer is past behavior, not what people say they'll do, what they've actually done before. If you're hiring someone, don't ask, can you handle a fast-paced environment? Instead, ask this: tell me about a time when things moved faster than you expected. What happened? If you're dating someone, don't ask, would you be patient with me? Watch how they've treated people in the past. Past behavior is the one thing that can't be rewritten in the moment. It already happened, and it tells you far more than any interview answer ever will. You might even recognize someone you slowly stopped trusting without ever being able to explain why. And now, maybe you can. So, 3 patterns. The evidence nobody asked for. The invisible third party. The yes that doesn't survive contact with reality. Here's what I hope you're feeling right now. Not judgment. Something closer to recognition. Because every one of these behaviors comes from the same place. A very human need to avoid pain. The pain of disappointing someone, the pain of conflict, the pain of the gap between who we want to be and what we feel we can actually do. That's not weakness. That's just people doing what people do. And when you can see it clearly, when you can watch the pattern emerge without it pulling you under, something shifts. You stop getting hurt as easily. You stop chasing answers that aren't coming. You start making better decisions with clearer eyes. Understanding people doesn't mean you have to excuse everything they do. It just means you stop being surprised by it. And that quiet clarity is one of the most useful things psychology has ever given me. If any of this hit close to home, leave a comment. Not to call anyone out, just to say, yeah, I've seen that too. Because someone reading that comment is going to feel a whole lot less alone. If one of these patterns felt familiar, there's probably a reason for that. Subscribe if you want more of this. There's a lot more to explore together. See you in the next one.